Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this, I think, timely and a webinar of enduring importance on the subject, the greening of arbitration and the legal system in the Caribbean. We welcome you very warmly and thank you for taking time to join us. I am coming to you from the British Virgin Islands International Arbitration Center. And I am very proud to begin by telling you that the BVI International Arbitration Center has signed the Green Pledge. So we are on hallowed and committed ground. As I said, the topic that we will be discussing for the next hour and a half or so is very timely, and I believe it is one of enduring importance. The evidence of climate change and its impact, they are abundant and they are compelling. We see it, sea level rise, higher temperatures, drought, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, earthquakes, and we who live in the Caribbean see the rise in sargassum, a now annual phenomenon. So I think it's very timely, and we meet at an auspicious time when the global community is assembled in Glasgow in Scotland for COP26. And the COP26 is a gathering of the great and good of the world, as we know, and they are there called upon and hopefully committed, not only to discussing the very important issue of climate change and climate action, but really committed to action to address the issue of climate change. It is all for the global good. Among the things that will be discussed in Glasgow are climate finance, sustainable land management, energy transition, natural resource management, ocean action, and very importantly, climate justice. Several Caribbean governments are represented as governments in their own right, and several other jurisdictions are represented through important agencies and organizations. The Commonwealth, for example, by its Secretary General, Dame Patricia Scotland. The Commonwealth is there. The Commonwealth represents, let me get my figures right, 54 member countries and 32 small states, many of which are small island developing states. Many of them are in the Caribbean and are included in that representation that the Commonwealth will be providing. The plan of the Commonwealth will be a call, as I understand it, will be a call for greater climate action, not words, action, and for the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals to be met. As the Secretary General of the Commonwealth has said, and she herself is of Caribbean origin, the Commonwealth of Dominica and the island of Antigua and Barbuda, as she has said, the science is clear. Failing on this mission will cost us a viable, sustainable future for our children and our grandchildren. The Caribbean Development Bank is also there with a very high level delegation. And they are bringing, as I understand it, particular focus to the vulnerabilities of small island developing states and putting on the table proposals primarily related to resilience in relation to small island developing states. So in my mind, the imperative is clear. There is a compelling reason, there's an urgent need for action, and each of us has to play a part. I have always believed in the power of one. And as I prepared for today, I reflected on the power of one, because this campaign for greener arbitrations, has really been born out of the resolve and the decision of one woman, Lucy Greenwood, a well-known international arbitrator, to do what she could to cut down on to help to improve the use of the environment. So while COP26 goes on, we are here and we are met to say and to discuss what we as arbitrators, what we as lawyers have done, and what we can do, and what we are doing to help to make the world greener, to make arbitration institutions greener, to make the courts and the court system greener, and for the legal profession to make itself greener. My name is Dancia Penn. I am Queen's Counsel and a practicing lawyer in the British Virgin Islands. I am also, and this is the capacity in which I am here today, I'm the Vice Chair for Latin America and the English-speaking Caribbean of the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations. We have a very distinguished panel to discuss our subject today. The subject is divided into, as I said, broad headings. What are the courts doing? What is the legal system doing? What are the lawyers doing? And very importantly, what are these pledges? With me, and to begin with our first subject, we have the Honourable Barry Leon. Barry is well known to all of us and globally. He's a former commercial court judge of the British Virgin Islands, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, but he's an arbitrator at Arbitration Place in Toronto, 33 Bedford Row in London, and a co-founder of Caribbean Arbitrators. But he's really here today in his capacity as a member of the North American group of the Campaign for Greener Arbitrators. We also have Damian Croker, who, Damian, I will tell everyone, you're the bravest man I know. Damian is the only non-lawyer in this group. We're very happy to have you, Damian, and Damian is the chair of the Latin American and Caribbean group for the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations. So Damian is the chair, I am the deputy. We also have, and we welcome her very warmly, Karima Sauma from San Jose in Costa Rica. She has a very impressive background and career. Karima is a lawyer in the United States as well as in Costa Rica. And she is the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer of the Arbitration Center in San Jose in Costa Rica. And she is in active practice as a lawyer and an arbitrator with a boutique in San Jose. The bios of each of the speakers is on the website, and I encourage you to read them. They're all very impressive, they're all very extensive, so I will not take time to go in detail into each of them. Karima, together with Tanya Goddard, will be speaking on the topic of how are arbitral institutions in the Caribbean greening? What efforts are arbitral institutions in the Caribbean taking to go green? Tanya is a lawyer by profession, and she is the Secretary General of the AMCC, which is the Arbitration and Mediation Court of Barbados. And as I said, she's also a practicing lawyer. Then from the legal profession, we have Mr. Ruggles Ferguson and Mrs. Kimberly Crabb Adams. Ruggles comes today with a very wide background and with a very wide perspective on what is happening with the legal profession throughout the English-speaking Caribbean. Ruggles has, as I've said, a very long and extensive bio as well, and he's here today in his capacity as the president of OCBA. OCBA is the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations. So it's a pan-English-speaking Caribbean organization. Kimberly Crabb Adams is the president, the current president of the BVI Bar Association. We were also to have had, and you would have seen on your programs, two Chief Justices from the region, Sir Patterson Cheltenam of Queen's Counsel, Chief Justice of Barbados, as well as Dame Janice Pereira DBE, Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Regrettably, earlier today, each of the Chief Justices separately advised me that for different reasons, they were unable to join us this afternoon. So I apologize for their absence. I thank them for their support and their interest of this initiative. And we will speak collectively about ways in which the judiciary is going green and in which the judiciary can go green. So with that from me, by way of opening remarks, I would like to turn it over to Barry and Damian for them to deal with the subject of the pledges, give the backgrounds to the pledges, the protocols, and so on. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Damian.
Thank you, Dancia. Myself and Barry are going to discuss with you today about the greener arbitration. I'm going to give you some background and tell you something about pledges. Then Barry will go into more detail about ways that this can be implemented via the framework and the protocols. So I will get started. So thank you for your time and coming to listen to us today on this very important topic. Dancia has already given a background to context as only she could in terms of why this is so important for the Caribbean region. And I certainly won't attempt to go into that in this talk. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned already about Lucy Greenwood, in 2019, Lucy launched what she termed the Green Pledge to minimise the impact of her arbitration practice on the environment. Green Pledge caught the attention of the wider arbitration community. Soon hundreds of individuals had signed up to the pledge. I was one of them, one of the early signer-uppers. Lucy realised that while the Green Pledge worked for those who practice as arbitrators, the arbitration community was keen to get behind a broader campaign to address waste and unnecessary travel and often occur in international arbitrations. As a result, it brought together representatives of key stakeholders in international arbitrations to spearhead the campaign for greener arbitrations. In 2020, the Campaign for Greener Arbitrations established a steering committee comprised of members of the arbitration community, and I was fortunate enough to join that committee. The fundamental objective of the steering committee is the establishment of a framework, set of protocols to promote better environmental behaviour through a series of action items. Protocols serve as a practical guidance for implementing the tenets of guiding principles as outlined in the Green Pledge, which I will discuss in a few moments. The Protocols Drafting Working Group began work in mid-2020 and considered all aspects of international arbitration, including the roles played by arbitrators, counsel, firms, chambers, institutions, conferences and vendors, the whole gambit involved in the world of arbitration. In doing so, they identified a number of areas each of the stakeholders within these groups to significantly improve and adjust their behaviours to reduce their environmental footprint. Following a public consultation carried in 2021, including here in the Caribbean, the campaign launched its framework and 6 associated protocols. And I will go into those after I've finished. A bit about the actual committee itself. There's a global steering committee, which has various subcommittees related to social media, research, policy, and then regional committees. And it's a regional committee for Latin America and the Caribbean, which myself and Dancia sit on. It's broken down into 4 areas: Brazil, Caribbean, which Dancia is responsible, Central America and Mexico, and Spanish-speaking South America. If you're from any of these regions, please reach out to us. We're here to help you and implement what Barry's going to talk about. So you might be sat there thinking, well, there's polluters out there. Ironically, I happen to be sat in the country where it all started, arguably. That's not what today is about. Today is about what we can do as a legal community. Now, as Dancia pointed out, I'm not a lawyer. I do sit as an arbitrator and a mediator. I'm an active member of the Charter of Arbitrators. And yes, they do allow in non-lawyers. And the legal system, of which I am a part in a way, there was a report done that showed that the UK top 50 law firms produce the equivalent to 150,000 tonnes of carbon emissions in a year. This was in the last financial year, in fact. They require 2.5 million seedlings to be planted and to grow for 10 years to offset 150,000 tonnes of carbon emissions. So that's one country. Admittedly, the UK has a big legal community. Imagine what it's like across the whole world. And we can make a difference to that and how we behave. Arbitrations, as a committee, we did an investigation and found a medium-sized international arbitration required 20,000 trees to be planted to offset emissions. Now, a lot of those emissions were as a result of getting in a plane. Okay, so look, every little bit helps. You can make a difference. We can all make a difference. And as Nancy has said, one can make a difference. In this case, Lucy having an idea, but also us all being part of that. So I'd ask you, think twice before pressing print, getting on a plane, leaving an empty room with a light on. How many times do you do that? I know I get told off by my wife. Going by car instead of train, before using plastic cups, throw away instead of recycling, applying all on an email. When you get an email, and there's lots of people copied, you don't have to tell them all, yes, thank you. It's the person who sent it. And that can save a surprising amount of carbon emissions. And upgrading the latest iPhone, think about it. You upgrade your computer, your iPhone, that has an environmental impact in terms of recycling carbon emissions. If you're a judge or an in-house counsel or a partner, an arbitrator, or a mediator, you can control what happens in front of you. This talk might have arbitration written over it. This applies equally to judges, to mediators, and anyone else who can control how the parties behave. So what is the Green Pledge? Well, actually, arbitration Green Pledge was produced, and that is I'm going to tell you about now. There's also been the mediation and the litigation green pledges, which are based on this, and they're very much the same, slightly different wording, but essentially the same. So what is it about? It's about creating a workspace that has a lower environmental footprint. Responding electronically, you don't have to always send letters. Encouraging the use of video conferencing facilities as opposed to travel. That includes interviewing witnesses. Avoiding printing. In terms of bundles, you don't have to print out. Electronic bundles work really well. That's been shown. Using where possible, suppliers and service providers are committed to reducing their environmental footprint. Think about the supply chain you're involved in, whether you're a court, whether you're a law firm. What are those suppliers? What are their commitments? Considering or suggesting where appropriate that witnesses or experts give evidence through video conferencing facilities. Do they really need to get on a plane or a car or a train to attend 10 minutes? Avoid unnecessary travel, using video conferencing facilities as an alternatives. We've been getting used to that. COVID, at least, has had some benefits. And considering questioning the need to fly at all times. And if you have to have a carbon footprint, consider offsetting some of it. Not just about travel, that's the things that you do. So please sign up. There are 3 pledges. You're an arbitrator, a mediator, or you're involved in litigation. There's a pledge for you. Quite similar. The important thing is you can make a difference. Barry now is going to tell you about this in more detail. Thank you.
So first, let me talk about the Greener Arbitration's 8 guiding principles. Number 1 is creating workspace with reduced environmental footprint by looking for opportunities to reduce energy consumption and waste. The second principle, and this will translate itself as we go into the various protocols, corresponding electronically, and Damian mentioned that, unless hard copies are expressly needed, but being mindful that email has a carbon footprint too. Encouraging video as an alternative to travel, including for fact-finding and witness interviews. Avoiding printing and requesting electronic rather than hard copies. Promoting the use of electronic hearing models. Using, wherever possible, suppliers and service providers that are committed to reducing their environmental footprint, including for arbitration hearings. Considering and/or suggesting, where appropriate, that fact witnesses and expert witnesses testify by video. Avoiding travel, using video as an alternative, and considering questioning the need to fly and offsetting carbon emissions for arbitration-related travel. You know, these 8 principles then have been translated into a more operative documents. Those are the protocols. And so what we have is the framework that I just outlined, the 6 protocols, and a model procedural order for arbitrations. The reality, and I think everybody will be thinking this, in an arbitration, people are going to do what's necessary for their case. So it's not that these things are designed to be rigid rules by any means, but what they're intended to do is to give people pause for thought and to think about whether, in the particular circumstances of the case, a different approach could be taken. And of course, through the pandemic, those approaches have become part of our daily life. So the protocols provide a detailed guideline for different arbitration communities or different players in the arbitration world to adopt greener practices. And I stress, as applicable and as appropriate in the circumstances. Each contains examples of sustainable behaviors that can be adopted. So let me go through the 6 protocols and the model procedural order. The protocol for arbitral proceedings. This provides all the participants, the parties and the arbitrators, with tangible measures to adopt specific actions in arbitrations, either by agreement or by tribunal order. The parties and the tribunal should consider the various criteria: the applicable law, the size of the arbitration, the tribunal's ability and the parties' abilities to communicate and to prepare documents electronically, the burden and costs of implementing sustainable behaviors by the various participants, including the arbitral institution, impact that the measures will have on the efficiency of the arbitral process, and the availability of cybersecurity measures to protect the integrity of arbitral proceedings. Of course, that is something, again, important for all video proceedings. And there's, as I mentioned, an accompanying model green procedural order. It's draft language that can be adopted by tribunals to implement the sustainability measures in an arbitration. It's not intended that they be adopted in their entirety, but each provision should be considered in the circumstances of the particular arbitration. All of this is really intended to get parties to pause at the outset and to consider the specific green measures that they can adopt. Second, there's the green protocol for law firms, chambers, legal service providers working in arbitration. And this protocol provides the legal advisors, the employees of legal advisors, with suggested sustainable measures for minimizing environmental impact, which can be integrated into their daily operations or adopted on a case-by-case basis. So that's the arbitration we've covered, the legal services providers. Then we have the specific players in the arbitration. First, the arbitrators. So this protocol provides the arbitrators with practical guidance to minimize their environmental impact. Sharing the protocol with co-arbitrators, encouraging them to adopt the protocol in procedural order number 1, encouraging parties to agree to at least some sustainability measures, such as use of technology platforms, video and teleconferencing, and so forth. and improving their own green workspace. The protocol for arbitral institutions has measures similar to those in the other protocols, but has some specific ones geared to arbitral institutions, encouraging the institutions to allow staff to work from home to avoid the carbon travel footprint. And keep in mind, all of these were in the works as the pandemic was just getting going. It provides that institutions allow staff time to volunteer with organizations involved in environmentally friendly initiatives. The protocol for arbitral hearing venues provides that arbitration hearing venues with measures to minimize the impact of environmental considerations in their daily operating measures or relating to particular arbitrations. It ties in with the protocols that I mentioned earlier for arbitral proceedings and for law firms, which encourage partnering with suppliers who adopt green measures. And then there is the Green Protocol for Arbitration Conferences. And perhaps not by choice in this case, but the BVI International Arbitration Center is following the spirit of this in spades. It suggests measures for reducing the environmental impact of arbitration conferences, electronic registration and digital payment options. That was taken care of in this case because it's free and electronic registration was the only method. Elimination of paper handouts, I think that's been done. Environmentally friendly paper for badges and lanyards, but we've got electronic signs on our tiles. Limiting the use of single-use items, using sustainable catering companies, encouraging the use of environmentally friendly transport to and from venues for in-person conferences. To take this further, the subcommittee that I'm involved with, the North American subcommittee, organized and hosted a global workshop. We invited over 100 organizations a couple of weeks ago to meet for half a day and to talk about how conferences, how training, how moots in the world of arbitration can be carried on in a more sustainable way, but also to carry on the benefits of virtual, which go beyond the environmental benefits. But the important one, to my mind, is making all of these programs available around the world to people who wouldn't be able to travel for cost and time reasons, not just in developing areas of the world, but everywhere. And what will come out of that, and if you were following, and I encourage you to follow the campaign for greener arbitrations and the North American committee, will be the key takeaways on things that can be done by those organizing conferences, training, and moots and other events in arbitration to make for a greener way of doing things, but also to make for the benefits of diversity and inclusion that virtual and hybrid offer. So on that note, Dancia, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, there we have it, a very, very fine setting for what we are about to discuss next. And I thank you, Barry, and you, Damian, for providing us with such a clear and detailed background. So Karima, may I invite you as the CEO of your arbitration center to speak to us about what you are doing to green your institution in Costa Rica. And I'll ask Tanya to follow you by telling us as well what she is doing to green her institution in Barbados. So over to you both.
Thank you, Dancia. And thank you so much for the kind introduction, and to the organizers for inviting me. It is such a pleasure to participate in this BVI Arbitration Week and to speak on such an interesting topic. And just to give a little bit of context, as you all know, the climate crisis is something that we hear about often. Its effects are something that most of us have suffered in one way or another. But I think what is lacking in a general sense is a concrete plan to tackle this from the perspective of every actor in society. And really, the campaign for greener arbitrations is a real step forward for all of us involved in arbitration to contribute to the goal of sustainable growth. That is why I'm so thrilled to be talking here about this and to learn more about what others are doing. And I think this is a passion that many of us here share. International arbitration is such an incredibly useful tool to resolve conflicts. And this is even more so in times of crisis like the one we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. However, if we really want to further the growth of arbitration, this mechanism should be mindful of the challenges and needs of the times. So if we want to make arbitration greener, it would be more appealing, more aligned with our values, and it would become a more sustainable mechanism. I really think arbitral institutions are in a unique position to drive sustainable change because we are in charge of managing the cases and handling most of the logistical aspects involved in a case. So as Damian and Barry were mentioning before, the Green Protocol for Arbitral Institutions contains suggested sustainability measures for minimizing the impact that institutions have on the environment. Sika AmCham, which is the center that I represent, has already signed the Green Pledge, where we commit to the campaign's guiding principles and to reduce our carbon emissions. I don't want to be very repetitive, and I'm not going to repeat what Damian and Barry already said, but I do want to refer to some of the initiatives contained in the protocol for arbitral institutions that we have implemented at the center and that have been very successful. The first is the use of green energy. And you know, Costa Rica is a country that's very invested in everything that has to do with sustainable growth, protecting the environment. And since 2014, Costa Rica, where we are based, has been running on over 98% renewable electricity sources, making it one of the greenest countries in the entire planet. And this has been, of course, a huge deal for everything that has to do with sustainable growth and just using clean energy resources. The second is reducing our energy consumption and our environmental footprint. The protocol indicates that the institutions shall endeavor to improve the energy efficiency of the facilities and equipment to reduce the environmental footprint. And this can be achieved by small steps, such as using more natural light, using LED lights, using water-saving facilities, recycling, using eco-friendly cleaning materials, among others. We have introduced all of these measures and they have had a positive impact on our operation, even though when we see them independently, they might sound like really small measures. But the thing is, we have to think in the sum of all the elements. And I think that's very important when thinking about our impact on the environment. The third is going digital. And COVID-19 was such a trigger for going digital, not just in Costa Rica, but everywhere in the world. And the protocol states that arbitral institutions should encourage the use of technology for the conduct of proceedings to minimize printing, the use of paper, and travel. But now with COVID and how our world was turned upside down and we implemented more technology into our processes, this is probably one of the easiest measures to implement, and that already many of us have implemented just because of the circumstances we are in now. Before going digital, we wasted a lot of paper and copies for the parties, the tribunal, and in order to keep physical files of all of our cases. But once we establish digital files, and we have done this since 2016, all of our cases are electronic, and this all changed dramatically. Now everything is done online. The parties make their submissions via email, or they upload their documents to the platform directly, which has allowed us to nearly forego the use of paper. Additionally, because of the pandemic, we implemented work from home measures. So we are all working remotely, and all our hearings are now virtual. This has also proved to be wonderful in terms of economy for the parties and impact on the environment. At the beginning, arbitrators and the parties were reluctant to using virtual means to have especially hearings that involved questioning witnesses or experts. But I think now we're in a place where everybody is more confident and really has become used to using virtual hearings. And so in addition to having no hearing bundles or hard copies distributed, everything is electronic, no one has to travel for the hearings, either domestically or internationally. And international cases, we know that this is even more important because traveling has a heavy carbon footprint. We hope that this is something that we continue to use in a post-pandemic world, if not in all cases, at least in low value and less complex cases. I think that if the parties and the arbitrators and all the actors involved in arbitration cases become comfortable with having virtual hearings, then this will be something that's more commonplace. Also, we encourage recycling, and this is something that is done at a national level as well. And this includes providing clearly marked recycling bins, eliminating plastic bags, and proper disposal or recycling of outdated or broken electronic equipment and furniture. I think there should be standard practice everywhere, and it is also a very easy step that can be taken by institutions. However, even better than recycling is reusing and limiting waste. And this includes the elimination or limit of single-use and/or plastic items. And here we think about plastic bottles, plastic cups, straws, plates, cutlery. All this should be avoided. In Costa Rica, these are frowned upon generally, and you almost don't see them anymore in professional settings. However, I know this is not the norm in many places, and I would love to hear your experiences of how you have been handling this, but we should strive to change this. And these are some of the more important steps we have taken at the center to minimize our impact on the environment and to make arbitration greener. However, I do think that this is an ongoing process, and we should strive to be creative and be constantly on the lookout for ways to do even better. Thank you. And I'll hand it over to Tanya.
Thank you very much, Karima. I think that in many ways we're one single mind as I listen to your presentation about some of the recommendations with the Green Protocol. Let me just start by saying I wish to thank the organizing committee of the BVI Arbitration Week and Ms. Dancia Penn, who was previously introduced as the vice chair of the subcommittee for Latin American and English-speaking Caribbean on the greener arbitration. In order for me to have a brief discussion on arbitration, greener arbitration is necessary to understand the context for the Caribbean in particular, because we have very acute sensitivities when it comes to climate change issues. And then I wouldn't go into all of the statistics and the surveys being done, but definitely those of us in the region have experienced the warmer weather, the extended periods of drought, the decreased rainfall, which has caused some degree of economic challenges within the region. And as everyone introduced the COP26 Glasgow journey, it is very much a timely discussion to be had. But for me, I have to begin as to when did I become aware of the greener arbitration campaign and the Green Arbitration Pledge. And I have to say that about 2 years ago, I was reading an article online at my desk about the campaign for greener arbitration and the Green Arbitration Pledge. And I thought to myself, being in Barbados, this is an initiative which should be supported by the AMCC, and whomever is in charge at that point, I hope they look into the program. And we fast forward a year and I become the person who should be looking at the initiative overall. And what I thought was really excellent about the idea is that arbitration as we knew it in the traditional sense could be conducted in a more eco-friendly, carbon neutral manner, which even though for many of us is obvious, yet at the time we thought of no tangible programs that I knew of at the time where you had protocols or principles or guidelines that you can rely on. I mean, it is amazing since that time to now, the various projects and committees which has been generated from what I call that initial article online by Miss Lucy Greenwood. In 2021, the AMCC is invited by the Honourable Barry Leon to participate in a workshop about shaping the arbitration. And one of my directors and myself, we jumped at the opportunity to sit with colleagues within the region to discuss the issues, where we had a voice which was unique in many regards, which even though we looked at the international platform with the emission trading schemes and the various other programs in place, we were experiencing climate change issues every day. And for us, even on a national or regional level, level, we have single-use plastics legislation. We had, moved towards a blue economy, food security issues. So for us, where people discuss carbon emissions, even though we weren't emitting them on the scheme, we were having the negative side effects. So for me, as being on an island, this was a critical topic. So in 2021, when the campaign publishes the several protocols, which for me are interlinked, arbitrators, arbitral conferences, and arbitration institutions in particular, where they focus on the three main areas, which are adopting clean forms of energy, reducing the long haul travel, and reducing waste by eliminating my very favorite hard copy filings. These were areas that we definitely looked into. Now, for me, as part of an institution, the green protocols for arbitration institutions was particularly appealing, not just because it was the right thing to do being on an island, but because of the ease in which many of the protocols could be implemented. So we decided it would be more prudent to have a more natural and organic implementation, where we are still formalizing the formal program so that we can sign up to the pledge. And what we did was try to, in our day-to-day activities, put some of those recommendations in place. And we were fortunate because being on an island where renewable energy is important, so it was being used not just for solar water heating, but for generation of electricity, where the use of LED lights it was something already we had in practice. The appreciation for natural lighting. When I took over in 2020, we moved to a new building, and many of the persons on my floor, they came with great enthusiasm to bring their plants in, and it was quite a little competition in the office, where they appreciated that having that green space, even within the building, was necessary. And it was environmentally something that was also positive. So let's get into what the AMCC is doing. As I earlier indicated, we felt that it would be more prudent to have a more organic implementation many of the recommendations. As I indicated, our government on a national level, we already had programs such as recycling, which is being extended now for more domestic use. We did do the renewable energy. We had LED lights. If you want to put us in context as to how the protocol is divided, because it has certain subheadings, I can indicate some of the examples in which we were able to implement the protocol. So in terms of reducing the energy consumption, yes, we have the LED lighting. But in our office, quite frankly, people prefer natural lighting. It's being part of the Caribbean, our weather is normally excellent. The use of power strips for electronic devices. We don't have electric hand dryers in our office. That is not something that was being used, so that's one aspect of it. In terms of being more digital, what the COVID-19 pandemic did was usher it a little faster than what it would have been prior to. So we are in the midst of, we've started with the update of our website, but more importantly, with providing online services for our panelists and for our clients, where they're able, just as Karima indicated, to either file their submissions via email. We're in the process of just finalizing our online platform so that there's e-filing as well. We were able this year actually to have online training for our mediators. Prior to joining the AMCC, I was trained by the AMCC, the AMCC facilitated training, and we had people fly in from all over the region. In this instance, we were able to host mediation training for our mediators throughout the region online, where everyone was able to communicate and exchange ideas via our online platform. So in that way, we did utilize the recommendations and were able to actually reduce our carbon footprint in that regard. Then simple day-to-day activities within the office, such as not using the printers. We don't have individual printers. I think maybe one or two people, but if we have to print, it's a group printer. Those are as Karima correctly stated, those are the small things which can be done day to day, which makes a very big difference. And that's what's important. And as I said initially, that's what's so appealing about the protocols as they stand. They are practical, they are hands-on, and they're not expensive in those terms. And therefore, being on an island, there's something that we can easily attain. I have my water bottle. Because of the pandemic, we have to use plastic bottles for guests, but in general, we have a water fountain in the office, especially the young ones. They're all very good with their water bottles in office. We don't do single-use plastics. We use cutlery, and those are the ways in which we've already been living that way for a long time within the region. It's just an extension. Having said all of that, what I think is important to note that although we are on the path, we have by no means reached our destination. And there's still a lot more that has to be done and that can be done in this regard in terms of having more greener arbitrations and reducing our carbon footprint. And what I would like to see for us is that we continue with the trainings online. As Karima said, a lot of what we've started now during the pandemic should continue. But as an extension, having our arbitrators and mediators also sign on to the pledge, also try to make those recommendations in their day-to-day proceedings when they're dealing with the parties, encouraging parties to not fly in necessarily for one day of hearing. As a litigator years ago, I remember having a case where we flew an expert in for one question. We flew him in from California to Barbados for one question. Could you imagine the carbon footprint that that trip alone caused? So now with the current situation, we can actually say, no, that's not going to happen. We can interview that witness on an online platform. So in terms of where do we go from here, definitely the AMCC will be looking to embrace more fully the greener arbitration campaign for greener arbitration. Definitely looking to partner with our other colleagues within the region and international, like Karima, who also have good projects in place, and to also volunteer with organizations and be more eco-friendly. So for us, we're on the path, but we're nowhere near our destination. But I look forward to joining with my colleagues in continuing to have a greener arbitration. Thank you.
Tanya and Karima, thank you both very much. And they're certainly compelling stories, good stories, and very illustrative of the fact that it is simple things that each of us can do that can add up to great achievements as we all seek to go green. And part of what I would like to do is to encourage all of us to really learn about the pledges, understand what the pledges are, understand what they're about, and sign them. A pledge is a commitment. And I think when we make commitments, we are bound, we are duty bound, we are conscious bound to honor them. Now, I've been looking at the clock, and we have the two very eminent lawyers, Ruggles Ferguson and Kimberly Crabb-Adams, who will speak on the legal profession and what it is doing to go green. And Ruggles and Kimberly, I would like to ask you, in the absence of the Chief Justices, if you could, in your comments, include things that you as active practitioners know that the courts have been doing in order to go green. So it's over to you both. Ruggles?
Hi, good evening, good afternoon all. Kimberly, do you wish me to go first, or you wish to go first?
Thank you, Ruggles. I was busy speaking and didn't realize that I hadn't unmuted my mic until you spoke.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. So I will speak first as we discussed. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. I am also conscious of the time, and I promise to be very brief with my comments. Now, in the BVI, what we have noticed is with our survival, I will say, of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, we actually had somewhat of a nudge in terms of trying to ensure that our profession continued to thrive in the midst of disaster. And so that was where we saw the introduction of litigating, I would say, through online means. So this was even before the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court had the e-litigation portal up and running for the BVI. We had to find somewhat of a hybrid where we could continue to administer justice, have matters filed, and everything was sort of done electronically. Now, that process we discovered in the midst of adversity worked very, very well for the BVI. We ended up having the court functioning very shortly after the hurricanes. And so once the e-litigation portal came on stream, it was not very difficult for BVI practitioners to transition into sort of online filings and online management of cases, as opposed to the hard copy filings and hard copy management of cases. Now, as litigators, I think we tend to like to feel paper in our hands, and we like to see our bundles, and we like to touch. But I think having had those experiences after the hurricane, and then going to an electronic filing system, it forced us to sort of reduce the amount of paper that we were using. So you would see things in our profession, I have found, you would see a lot of the firms having tags at the bottom of their emails, consider printing this email, consider whether it's necessary to print this email. And even if it is necessary to print the email, consider printing it double-sided. We would have some of our judges in BVI are very, very have gone pretty much over to the e-filing, and they don't require us to serve them with hard copy bundles anymore. A few judges, depending on how big the matter is, may wish for you to condense something and give them so that they have. But we have found that there's been a real seamless transition into sort of the electronic management of matters in BVI. In individual firms, so I will use my own firm as an example, we have, and this has been going on for some time, we have stickers on light switches which say things like remember to turn off when not in use, and stickers on some of the air conditioned units reminding us not to leave the office with them running. There's been a big sort of recycling movement, I would say, in the BVI. It's in the schools, it's in the businesses. And so in a lot of our firms as well, you would see that we are trying to implement recycling measures. In my own firm, where we have small kitchenettes, we don't have any sort of disposable anything. We only have reusable cutlery. We have persons on staff that continue to, wash and ensure that the kitchen is kept clean, but everything is reusable. And I suspect, having had meetings at other offices and having seen that in other buildings, that is something that is very common in our profession, where people are trying to reduce even things such as like the plastic forks and plastic cups. I have colleagues that have their own personal reusable items that they keep in their drawers, that they bring and they use while they're at work. And so that is one way that we see the reduction as well. COVID has sort of had somewhat of an impact on the way we practice. It has meant that we don't travel as often, and I don't even mean just even in flying. I don't even mean only in flying, even driving to a meeting, because everything is being done virtually. You find that you sit at your desk, and instead of driving to a location, you just opt, where there's a hybrid offering, you opt just to sign in from your desk instead of taking your vehicle and driving up the road. We have seen the reduction. Even I was saying to Ruggles earlier today, we had the OECS Bar Association meeting on this Saturday. And this has been, I think, about the fourth meeting that we've had where we haven't been able to travel. Now, in the past, we have been having our meetings in various of our Caribbean jurisdictions. And we lamented just on this Saturday how strange it is that we've been doing this for almost now 2 years and we haven't seen our colleagues in person. We are so used to, meeting up. And I said to Ruggles, in us not traveling by plane, it not only reduces our carbon footprint in that travel, but when we go to these meetings versus Saturday, it was 2 hours. We sat on the phone for 2 hours. We discussed everything, and that was the end of it. When we physically go, we have to have outings. So we have a welcome reception. We have an outing after the meeting. We have lunch. We go to, some sort of historical something. It's almost like a 3-4 day event, where we are doing all sorts of things. We're printing off our agendas for people who have flown in, etc. Whereas now everything is literally on your phone or your computer, and you're just, I haven't printed off an agenda for one of our meetings in almost 2 years because it's just not necessary. I just have everything on my phone. And so I think COVID has done that to the wider profession. Lots of conferences are now being held virtually, and people are not flying as often as they used to fly. And I wonder whether once things settle down, now this is something that I do not have the answer to. I just wonder how quickly we would want to return to what things were, or how comfortable we would be in allowing things to sort of peter out the way we used to do things, and use this model as a model to build on for the future, knowing how much of an impact it is having on our environment, in us not doing a lot of the things that we did in the past. How ready are we? And I'm hopeful, I don't have the answer, but I'm hopeful that this is something that we consider seriously, and something that we are happy to sign on to, because I think it is proven that we don't need a lot of what we have been so used to. We don't need the hard copy papers that we thought that we did. We're doing very fine without them. We don't need to fly and travel to these conferences as much as we think we did. We are having full trials. I had an appeal a few weeks ago, completely virtually. It was fine. You know, I didn't have to provide any hard copy bundles to my opponent, you know, and we survived, and it was great. You know, the courts have given us sort of guidelines as to, you know, bookmarking bundles, so it's easy for judges to find, you know, what we're referring them to at trial. They have, you know, given us, it's been a fluid situation, so they've given guidance, we've been able to give feedback, and we're finding creative ways of ensuring that it works well for everybody concerned. And so that's my comment that I leave. I just wonder how ready we are as a profession to keep things the way they are and to move things in the direction that it has come since we have been, you know, printing everything and traveling everywhere.
Very interesting. Ruggles?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon, fellow panelists. It is certainly a pleasure to be here, and I must thank Dancia for extending the invitation to be part of this unique forum. I say unique because I do believe that this forum itself, and we may not realize it, but opens up several opportunities for the legal profession in the wider region. And Dancia, in her opening, referred to the power of one, and we see what the power of one can do. And what I want to emphasize, if the power of one can get us where we are, then the power of organization, the power of the OECS Bar Association, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court encompassing 9 of the islands in our sub-region, and the power of OGBA as a regional organization embracing over 15 countries and several hundred lawyers. If we can get them all on board, then this campaign is certainly going to gain momentum and have greater impact. Because certainly, Dancia, before you invited me to this session, this issue of greening has not been on the formal agenda of OGBA, of the OECS bar, and I certainly intend to put it on those agendas in the coming weeks and months. But notwithstanding, as Kimberly mentioned, we have been operating, though not characterizing it as greening necessarily, but the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, OGBA, and the OECS bar have taken certain steps over the last year and a half that in a sense syncs with the greening agenda. And that is the transformation to technology. And so first and foremost, I want to make the point that to achieve this objective and to be as impactful as we can be and we should be, we have to change the culture and the mindset of our people. And there's a saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that has happened exactly in COVID. And I have had several experiences myself and other colleagues throughout the region. The last time I traveled, in fact, was in February 2020. That is almost after a monthly, sometimes twice a month travel. And that last travel was to the Privy Council, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, where I spent 1 week dealing with one matter, traveling up, hotel accommodation, transport within London, and finally returning home and being on the plane that came in the week before the first COVID case actually came in on the plane the week after. But this is to do one single case. And I just contrasted, fast forward, to another case that I have in January. And that case is being heard electronically. No traveling to the airport, no flying from the airport to London, no travel within London. Simply, as we are speaking here, doing the matter just as we do all other matters. And I wish to point out that the CCJ, many of us are not mindful of it, but the Caribbean Court of Justice, since 2016, yes, my mute, sorry, I'm not too sure how much you lot, but I was saying the CCJ, since 2016, 2017, has had e-filing, has had all its matters heard live and virtual for every single citizen of the Caribbean to hear, if they so wish, for every single matter before the original jurisdiction and the appellate jurisdiction of the court. And before these initiatives were introduced in our court, I had the privilege of the CCJ experience in an original jurisdiction matter. And, you know, the point I filed that the claim or application was filed about 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock in the morning, no running up. In fact, I said then, it was easier for me to file a matter in the CCJ than in Little Grenada, because I would have to run up a hill to get it filed, make sure I get there before 4 o'clock, or else you have to make the trip the next morning. And here I was sitting in Grenada, filing a matter in the original jurisdiction in Trinidad. And now all the courts have come on board. And I won't repeat what Kimberly said, save and except to say that as of 2 weeks ago, all the islands under the nine-member jurisdiction of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court can now file electronically, can sit in our offices and file electronically. The last two being St. Vincent and Dominica, launched about 2 weeks ago. Mediation is now conducted virtually. And there was some concern about that initially, because it was felt that for mediation, the importance of having the parties in the same room, within breathing distance of each other, being able to eyeball each other, because these small features impact and can possibly impact the outcome of a mediation. But it all goes back to the mindset and the cultural shift. Because I'm pleased to report, certainly in Grenada, we have had several mediations. In fact, every week, we have a heavy schedule of mediations, all done virtually with a high success rate, even though parties are not in the same room. So we have e-filing, we have mediations done virtually, and what I think will be the most significant or have most significant impact in the region, what we have been able to achieve in Grenada through collaboration is the establishment of the virtual magistracy. In Grenada on October 11th, we launched the virtual magistracy, complete with new regulations. And I say that because it's all about access to justice. And many times when we think of courts, we think of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, with the technological innovations taking place there. However, the magistracy accounts for over 90% of people who access the justice system. And that system has remained archaic for years. And what we have been able to do in Grenada is to ensure that the magistracy is now equipped with the technology so we can stay in our respective offices and do matters in the magistrates court as we do in the High Court and Court of Appeal. And what this means is that you have greater access to justice, not just greater access of parties to lawyers. Because what you have when they are competing High Court matters and Magistrates Court matters, people say, I'm in the High Court, I want an adjournment. I'm in the Court of Appeal, I want an adjournment. You can now make a seamless shift from High Court to Magistrates Court. In fact, I attended 2 Magistrates Court sittings this morning, all sitting right where I am. And it has been a great experience. And what we have been focusing on is the convenience of it, is the greater access to justice aspect of it, is the cost effectiveness of it, is the greater efficiency of it. However, what we have not been focusing on as an organization, I must confess, is the greening aspect of it and how that impacts our environment. And believe you, since Dancia called me and asked me to speak at this session, greening, I decided, well, listen, this is an important area, though I've never been into it in an organized way. So I just started to look at material. And I can tell you, just over the last 24 hours, in the Trinidad newspapers, interestingly, there was the Newsday yesterday. The Newsday, one of the dailies in Trinidad and Tobago, and the headline in the Newsday, one of the headlines was Experts Grim Climate Change Outlook for the Caribbean. Grim Climate Change Outlook for the Caribbean. And the article began with the words, the Caribbean region has been warming more than the global average. And that came from the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Professor Petri Thalas. And I just give a snippet of it. But this morning again, when I checked the Express newspaper sitting here in Grenada, out came at me another headline. And that is referring to the Conference of Parties, COP26 conference in Scotland. And the headline was, a matter of life and death. And one of the points that stood out to me, the point made by one British politician as described, Alok Sharma. And the point made there that climate change, to quote him, climate change did not take off. He stated, adding that the science had made it clear that human activity was, to quote, unequivocally the cause of global warming. What that means is if we are the problem, we must be the solution. And to be the solution, we all need to get on board, not just as individuals in our respective law firms, but as organizations, OGBA, OECS-BA, these are the regional organizations to promote the concept, to be part of the Greening Pledge, and just being invited here today, I think has directed my mind to the importance, the critical importance of not just change coming from within us and doing things differently, but also influencing change globally. And so it's the most I can pledge Ogba's support, and I will take the liberty also to say the OECS bar's support for this initiative, and I must commend the BVI Arbitration Committee for really undertaking this initiative. At first, when I heard it, I said greening arbitration. Let's see the link between the two. But I certainly have seen the link, and we need to collaborate more. And what I would urge is that we have more probably simple and professional messaging so that people or ordinary citizens can understand the serious importance of global warming and what we need to do individually and collectively to combat it. So thank you very much. These are our just points of interest, and we pledge to continue to work along with that Caribbean community to make a difference.
Ruggles, thank you so very much. I know you said yes out of politeness to me that day when I called you, but I'm so glad, and it's been a very wonderful experience, and I believe that today sets us in the Caribbean, in the legal community and in the arbitral community on a very good path. And it is a journey. It is not a destination. And it is part of why in my opening comments, I said that not only is the having of this panel this afternoon timely, but it is also enduring. And by enduring, I meant that it is going to go on. It is a long journey. One of the things I think that it is very important, and Ruggles, you and Kimberly, as active legal practitioners here, I think an important message that you can help to send, and it is a message that Barry, Damian, and I have discussed, is that there is legal work and legal possibility in this area. And I say that to be realistic and to bear in mind and being conscious of how we as lawyers think. Just last night, and I didn't get a chance to read it fully, but I saw on LinkedIn a case, the name is Smith and Fonterra. It was decided by the Court of Appeal in New Zealand last week on the 21st of October. And I thought I would mention it this afternoon and share the point that how illustrative this is of the possibilities for legal work, the possibility for legal career development in this area. So this is not just an academic exercise. And I believe that our discussion this afternoon has shown that it is not just an academic exercise. But in the Smith and Fonterra case, it is dubbed as the first climate change case and the first appellate decision in the Commonwealth concerning whether the law of tort can be used to seek wide-ranging private law remedies with respect to climate change. The claimant in that case had brought his claim in tort, negligence, and public nuisance. And he sought to have the court, and when I was a young lawyer, these were the kind of things, or young girl lawyer, let me say, these were the kinds of things I liked to do. But the court said, yes, climate change is an important issue, but I cannot accede to your invitation, Mr. Claimant, to extend a new tort, a new cause of action, as it were. As I said, I haven't read it in full, but I thought it was very important and highly illustrative of the fact that for lawyers, as well as, of course, for arbitrators, there is a great deal of opportunity ahead. We are pretty much at the end of our allotted time, but I wonder if I could thank each of you again for being here this afternoon, for the very important contributions that each of you has made. And may I invite each of you to just say 1 minute by way of a closing remark. Damian, would you like to start?
Yes, well, thank you. And thank you all for coming today and supporting this initiative. And Ruggles, I'm really encouraged by what you had to say and very excited that everyone will sign the pledge and take this seriously and actually make a difference, because we can, between us, make a difference. So yeah, next thing you do, you leave this meeting, please go and sign up for the pledge. Right, that's my 2 pennies worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
I think Damian's on commission, but that's a good thing. What I was going to just remind the audience is there's a program, another climate change and arbitration program on Friday. And I was just looking to see if I could find the speakers. I know it's Wendy Miles, and I just can't remember who else is on the program.
The professor, I don't remember names either.
So it's that will be more substantive, and I think picking up on where Dancia just left off with areas in which there's, you can call it business opportunities for people in disputes, dealing with climate change disputes, whether in arbitration or litigation. I don't think the only other thing, I don't think I have anything additional to add, but I did want to remind people when it comes to the point about conferences and training, to watch out for what we're going to produce from the workshop that I mentioned in my remarks, because I think there will be some suggestions that will be helpful, particularly to the bar associations, looking at how the content can be delivered to give people the best of both worlds. That is, the content in a format that doesn't have as much impact, but then when there are conferences, to make them meaningful in terms of what people all say they're missing, which is the networking, the spending time together, as opposed to sitting in a big room and listening to people talk. The kind of delivery that we're doing today can be done virtually.
Well said. Thanks, Barry. Karima?
Thank you, Dancia, and thank you to my wonderful co-panelists and everybody here in the audience today. I just wanted to echo Tanya's comment on looking for ways to collaborate with other institutions, other organizations, and just having this possibility of learning from others and increasing what we're doing to make a bigger change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karima. Tanya?
Yes, just to wrap up, I will echo you, Dancia, in saying that for the practicing attorney, there are opportunities from transaction where the agreement is drafted straight to litigation, but that's another webinar completely, which we would have to discuss. And also, I look forward to working with my colleagues in the region, because together, that's when we're going to make the biggest impact. Thank you.
Absolutely. Kimberly?
Hi, I think, as I've said, I think in the BVI, we have somewhat aligned ourselves with a sort of more greener perspective, but I don't think, as Ruggles has said, that it has been characterized as such. So I think my takeaway from this session is to encourage more active buy-in by the members of at least the BVI Bar Association with the Greener Pledge. I'll see how I can encourage through that forum more buy-in by our professionals. I don't necessarily see it as being a problem because, as I've said, there's just been so much done already to go for firms going green. So I'm hopeful that we can see significant buy-in from the BVI.
Thanks, Kimberly. And
Dancia, there's, sorry, just before Ruggles, there's in the chat, and it's the first comment that we've gotten, it's somebody who's watching us from Nigeria. Please, can we take the next step in institutionalizing green arbitrations? Can we do more than remote hearing protocols and practice directions? Can we have green arbitration / remote hearing as the main means and not a secondary fiddle, not an exception?
Well, I'm very grateful for that comment, and I can't see it actually, but I thank the person who made the comment. I think it's very wise, and we will take note of it.
Yes.
I would say in Nigeria that LASIAC, the Lagos Arbitration Center, has actually signed up to the pledge and is implementing it as well. And certainly you can do everything remotely and electronically with them in Nigeria. Just a shout out for LASIAC.
Very good, very good. But we know that, thank you very much from Nigeria. We know that Ruggles is going to sign the pledge right after this, and we know that he will use his good offices with OCBA and within the OECS to ensure that the legal profession and lawyers take the pledge. But Ruggles, just a final word?
Yes, certainly. I will do so. It's an area of concern for me, but again, in everything you need leadership. And I think what the BVI Arbitration Center has done, and the fact of this meeting centering on greening, has opened up several opportunities to learn more about it. I'm quite happy that I attended this forum today. And what I would say, despite all the challenges of COVID, let us look at the positive, let us look at the opportunities created. I do not see us going back to the old way of things. As some people say, well, after COVID, return to in-person this and in-person that. What we have to do is to use this opportunity to push forward. And now we have the greening aspect, the greening argument, which has not been effectively used, I think, either by the court or by the bar associations in the region. I think it has given us one more bit of ammunition to use to push for total transformation with technology of the legal system and ensure greater access to justice while contributing to a much cleaner environment.
Well, thank you very kindly. So it's left for me to, again, thank each and every one of you for taking time and for sharing so much. I think we've had a wonderful exchange this afternoon. I have certainly learned a great deal. I'm very impressed with a lot of what I have heard. And it is so important that we come together like this and that we share. I'm very sorry that our judges were unable to join us this afternoon, but they were very well represented, and the work that the courts has been doing has been quite adequately expressed here, in my view. We want to thank again the Arbitration Center. As I said at the beginning, the BVI Arbitration Center has signed the Green Pledge, and we look forward to the session on climate change on Friday and to the rest of Arbitration Week. Many thanks to all of you, and goodbye.
Yes, thank you, and all the best for the rest of the week. Thank you.